I think one of the most beautiful things you said was you are valuable in your own right. And the importance of empowering women, I think, in our society, because of the inequalities that exist, it's quite important for us to empower women.
If you could mobilize a group of people, what movement would you mobilize and why?
I would call my movement the mindful movement. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death between people aged 15 and 29. 1 in 3 people are expected to suffer from mental illnesses in their lifetime. So I believe that mobilizing people to strive for mental health would actually fix so many social ills in our society. And that is what I would mobilize.
Much. So we'll just jump straight into it.
No problem.
Yeah. So we're just going to jump straight into it. So the questions that I have for you are very much related to abusive relationships and that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to, the first thing, especially because we're in lockdown, I just wanted to ask you that during I think it was April or March last year, during the beginning of lockdown, we saw a spike in gender-based violence cases or stats in South Africa. Why was it that lockdown was so scary for many people that were in abusive relationships?
Well, I must say that in the last few months of lockdown, we were helping 10,000 calls a month. Wow. Which is relatively alarming. And so the reason for that was that when you're alone in your home for a while, it's not always about abuse. It's sometimes about memories that come in that lockdown, because we've heard of people being depressed. We've heard of people doing a lot of other things that the lockdown forced them to be reflective. And so the abuse that has been reported isn't always current abuse. Some of it's been recalling memories of abuse of other past abuses. I was abused as a child. I've hidden it all this time. So when we look at the abuse, it's not all abuse that happened in the last 48 or 36 hours. Some of it is abuse from many years ago, because we are a country that doesn't confront the hard issues.
Oh yeah.
We're still battling to confront the legacy of abuse in apartheid. Never mind abuse from your husband or the pastor down the road that happened 30 years ago. And
that would make sense as to why gender-based violence is such a massive problem in South Africa, and we have seen the heartbreaking effects of gender-based violence in this country, where for so many women and so many young girls, where we literally live in fear. Like you can't walk without looking back, even in the most safest areas. Why do you think South Africa just like has such a big problem with gender-based violence? Because it is like a pandemic in this country.
Well, for me, one of the very big things about gender-based violence is that we are, first of all, we're a very patriarchal society. We're a society where men rule and dominate. So if one looks at things like the Me Too movement that started in America, it was because they have patriarchy there as well, and senior people managed to get away with it, but it is worse in this country. We accept that men rule everything. They are heads of our companies, heads of the bank, heads of the government. So a lot of times women don't have the say or the recognition. And along with patriarchy comes the other problem. And the problem is that we are very, very quick to blame the woman. What she wore, what she dressed, what she said, why did she walk there? And we as women carry that through too as well, very sadly, because we don't have the compassion for our colleagues. We should be saying to other women, as I try to teach all my colleagues at work, it's not your fault, you're not to blame, it's the rapist's fault. And until we get our situation correct, we stop blaming the woman, I'm afraid to say that we are not going to deal with this issue.
And when you speak about patriarchy and also some hints of toxic masculinity that perpetuate this, so if this is the kind of country that we live in, how do we protect our young women and young girls? Because it sounds like something that needs to be dismantled structurally before it can actually get to the ground where we have to deal with gender-based violence issues. You know, like you're saying, we don't really face hard issues in this country. We sort of just sweep it under the carpet until it gets so big that we have to confront it. But then by the time we get there, we don't know how to fix it. it. So how do we confront this in a society that is rooted in toxic masculinity, in a society that always blames the woman, in a society that is ruled by patriarchy, like you're saying, even in the simple settings of our work, this is perpetuated, you know? So how do we get to a point where, for example, let's say there's someone who's in an abusive relationship right now. It starts off with subtle signs. How do we educate that person to look out for those signs? What mechanisms are there to help this person or to help us as a society?
That's a really great and a very important thing. So one of the most important things is that we need to come alongside other women. So what I mean by that, so if somebody is in a bad situation, you can't give them advice to leave. You need to give them a way to leave. So people, you read, why did she stay so long? Well, because they don't have alternatives. They may be married too young and don't have the education, have a child at home that they're looking after. So we have to help women to be able to leave. And that might, instead of saying, I think you should leave, it should be, how can I help you to leave? What do you need? And it could be, I start off with a lot of simple steps, like, do you have a bank account? Because, you know, many women, unfortunately, don't even have a bank account. So what happens is, I start off by saying, prepare to leave. Get yourself a bank account. If you've no skills, start to learn to type, start to learn to do a course. So we need to also empower women. So if we start right back as a young woman, as you are, most young women never live alone. They marry from home. So if their marriage doesn't work out, how can they possibly leave and start? They don't know where to go. So in a way, I guess I'm saying we need to teach women to be independent right from the very beginning. So I have a belief we need to encourage women to come into the fullness of who they are, and we need to be there really, how can I help you, not criticizing. It doesn't mean we shouldn't admit there's something wrong. But what it means is we need to stand next to them and be an involved bystander, not a looker on.
And like, I'm so glad that you touched on that, because a lot of people earlier on were talking about the financial dependency and the linkage between that and gender-based violence. And I'm so glad that you touched on that, how it's important for us to empower people that are in those situations, in order, like you're saying, don't just say leave, but how do we help you leave? It's a collective responsibility where we help one another, you know. But I just wanted to know, from the cases that you've worked with or from what you've seen, have you seen some mental health implications of gender-based violence on women? Because I know that there's a few that we can think of, but what have you seen or what have you encountered?
Well, I think the gender-based violence is something that you live with for your whole life. I'm a survivor. And all the women that I've worked with that are survivors, it lives with you forever. But what happens is you have to live past it. It won't go away when you shut the door on it, but you have to learn the fullness of your relationship and who you are. So you have to discover that young woman that you were once, and fall in love with yourself. Because what happens is gender-based violence causes you to hate yourself, because you can't believe this terrible thing is happening to you and that you must have done something bad to deserve it. So the first step to recovery in the journey, once you are in a safe place, very important, in a safe place, is learn to love yourself. I can remember sitting in front of a beautician who was teaching me how to do my makeup and weeping, and she said, I can't help you. And I'm saying, why? And the tears are running down my face. And she said, because you're crying too much, I can't put the makeup on. And then I realized that she wasn't going to fix me by putting makeup on my face, although I loved the lesson. I was going to fix myself by being strong and tackling the hurt I'd felt and regaining all those parts of me that had been stolen by my abuser. So it's a very long journey, and it's a journey we as women have to be kinder to other women about. I'll give you an example. In an office, you might find somebody starts being tardy at work, coming late, dressing badly, sometimes having body odor. It might be that they've been kicked out of their flat and they're living in their car at the worst circumstance. Other times it might be they're in such an abusive relationship they're not coping with life. So what do we do? That's my challenge. What do? Do we put our arm around her and say, I'm here for you? Or do we say, oh my gosh, don't put me next to Susan? So I think as women, we need to set the tone and make the changes, because men are not going to do it for us. Sisters are going to do it for themselves. And that is very important. So while I'm saying that, I want to say our phone operates 24/7. If you ever need help, we are here for you. And please remember that. Can I give you our free help number, which is *134* 7355#. If you follow the prompts on your phone, someone will call you back within a few seconds, and if you are in a life-threatening situation, we will help you. Why have I that service? Because I nearly lost my life. I physically fought for my life. I understand that happens. Nobody could have helped me. I needed to help myself. I needed to leave, and I didn't.
But I'm so glad that you're sharing your stories, because a lot of people, a lot of survivors are coming on here also sharing their stories. But do you mind explaining what is the process of reporting someone for gender-based violence? Because a lot of people are scared for their lives. Like you're saying, there's this dependency. So for someone who's in that situation that has this financial dependency on this person, because like from what you're explaining, you eventually lose some of your self-worth and you don't even know how to find that anymore. So how do you get to a space where you can say that I love myself in a situation where you've been placed where you are constantly told that you're not good enough? You're constantly made to feel as if you are a subordinate. You're constantly made to feel as if you're less than, constantly. So how do you move out of that? What do you say to a person that's struggling to find the courage to say that, listen, for my own mental health, for my own well-being, for my own physical well-being, I want to leave, but I don't know where to start. I don't even think I will find anyone that will take care of me after this. So what do you say to that person?
It's a very, very long journey. It's not an overnight journey, but it can be done, and we have many success stories. So for me, the first thing is I look at whether you're in a life-threatening situation or whether you can stay a little longer. Because if you're in a life-threatening situation, the's no hesitation. Leave straight away. If your children are in a life-threatening situation, leave straight away. If you've been in this situation for 18 or 10 or 5 years and you can stay another month without it affecting your life, start to plan your exit. So that's one of our very important things, is make sure that you've got all your documents, because people rush off and leave and they have to go back because they haven't planned their exit. So I just want to be very clear, an exit can only be planned if it's not going to cost you your life. So you need to have all your personal documents. Do you know how few women have got their children's birth certificates or copies of their lease or a bank account, as I mentioned earlier? So we need to be in control of our own lives with our documentation. And then as we're planning to leave, we need to look at what our alternatives are. So if a friend keeps telling you leave, you need to say, have you got a cottage for me? Have you got a room in your house? So have a place to go to. You can't just and people obviously do that, but you can't just sleep in your car with 3 kids and you're trying to get them into school. You have to plan, where will you go? Where will they go to school? So I think a planned exit is very, very important, because ending up in hospital or in a bad situation means that you lose control again, and quite often those people go back to their abusers. In my case, I fought for my life, and I was extremely emotionally and physically marked. But you know what? Look at me now, later. I live the best life I possibly can. So what I'm saying is, you can leave and have a fantastic life, but plan to leave, and there is hope. There are many organizations like mine that want to help you. You are not alone. You are not alone. There are people who want to help you to leave. There is no way that anybody can justify you staying in a relationship for religion. You married him for better or worse. No, I do not believe God ever planned for a man to hit a woman. And there are other motivations that people use to keep you in a relationship. And the answer is, if it does not feel good you need to leave. You need to have your self-worth. You need to get up in the morning and embrace life. If you're getting up in the morning and feeling like crying and feeling unhappy, I guess that's time to leave. You can call us and we will help you. And there are many organizations all over South Africa that want to help you. You do not have to stay in an abusive relationship. There are other ways out.
And how important is it to supplement? And I'm so happy that you said that, because I think someone is listening and just watching you saying all of these things, and it's resonating with them. But as you are talking about the different organizations that exist, I know the Uyinene Foundation also works to combat gender-based violence. I know the TS Foundation does the same thing. How important is it to supplement that with psychological help? Because in as much as you can get the person out, how do we start working on the psyche? How do we start working on the mind to get that person not even back, to get that person to overcome where they've been at? Because if you constantly live in a situation, or living in a situation where you are, like you said, you constantly feel like you're not good enough, if you're constantly being put down, you're constantly being abused, how do you move past that? How do you move past that to make sure that you see the other side? And how do you make sure that you supplement the help that you may be getting from the TS Foundation, the Uyinene Foundation, maybe with help from the SADC group, the South African Depression and Anxiety group?
Well, first of all, I must say you're absolutely correct, because one of the things is no person or organization can do it on their own. We all have to work together. So that's very important. Don't ever see that the organizations out there are in competition. Every one of them wants to help you get better. So the first thing that we do is we make sure that it's not a life-threatening situation. And then more difficultly, if they've got children, we have to make sure the children are safe and that they can continue with their lives. You know, if they're in school, you don't want them out of the school, which is why I'm saying there should be a planned exit. So one of the things that we very much believe is that people need to recover themselves, and so counseling is an extremely important aspect of recovery. So you need to know, why did you choose that person? So in my case, I'll give you an example, because I think it's quite a common example. I lived in a household where my father shouted at us all the time. So when I got into a relationship with the person who shouted at me, it was no big deal. You know, men shouted, my father shouted, and nothing was good enough for him. And so I became accustomed to that, and I kind of saw him subconsciously, and I didn't know it was part of my problem, as a role model. So a lot of times women recreate their relationships with their relationships that they're copying from their parents' marriage or their parents' relationship without consciously becoming aware of it. So I had subconsciously chosen a partner who shouted at me, and it didn't matter. For one day it did matter. I didn't want to take it anymore. I wasn't happy with it. The other thing I also want to mention, which is quite a shocking fact, which I think that we have undercovered in South Africa, is that we have so many women that are killed every day in our country by their intimate partner. I think the figure is 8 women a day are killed by their intimate partners in South Africa. And one asks oneself, how does that happen? When I started doing research internationally, I discovered that the most frequent time that can end up in a life-threatening situation is when you are ending your relationship with your partner. So we tell people, do not break up with him alone. Get someone to come with you. Make sure there's someone on standby, because you don't want to put yourself in a life-threatening situation while telling that man you're not going to stay with him, you're leaving. And so it's very important. We are not taught our safety factors. So just back to that, we do need to take stock of our life and be honest with ourselves. I had to be honest and say I'd chosen the wrong partner because I hadn't seen the danger signs, and it's frequent. I'm not the only woman that's done that. I would not choose a person today who shouted at me because I wouldn't take it, but I did take it then. So a lot of times we are young, we are stupid, we are encouraged incorrectly by religious persuasion, and we make decisions that do not make us able to take a relationship forward. So my answer to you very simply is, we human beings, we make mistakes, but you can rectify them.
And I'm glad that you spoke about the root cause of why you even chose to be in that situation, because one would think that forgiveness is a big part of the leaving journey. You know, like once you leave that relationship, there's still that part of yourself that you still need to forgive, because in as much as it's not your fault, you'll still feel like it's your fault. You know, and it's quite important for the counseling and the mental health support to be there in order to just make sure that you get the help that you need and find the root cause so you don't repeat it, which is something that seems to have helped you a lot. And when I speak about mental health and gender-based violence, I tread carefully, because I never want, you know how the mental health of men is sometimes used to justify the act itself. I never want to take away from their accountability. So how do we, as a society, tackle mental health and gender-based violence without taking away from the accountability of the action itself? And how do we as a community, what can we do to stop gender-based violence? What can we do as a community to combat gender-based violence?
You know, one of the heartbreaking things for me is that South Africa has one of the highest rates of suicide amongst men in the world. Because we are a very embargoed society, and I don't think we should ever take away from the accountability, but we should also remember it's never the woman's fault. Whatever you've done doesn't deserve a man hitting you or a man hurting you in any way. Remember that hurt isn't just physical. Hurt could be that I have people phoning me and saying, my husband calls me 30 times a day at work, because abuse in a relationship is about control. It's not about sex. It's not about money. It can be about sex. It can be about money. It's about all of those things. And so accountability is the abusers. So in answer to your question, if the person who's doing whatever they're doing, phoning you at work, hitting you, doing whatever, is the responsible person. But we as women quite often tend to take the blame on ourselves. And we say, I must have pushed him past the point where he could take whatever. So, and then we end up in a situation where we are blaming ourselves every day for being a bad woman or a bad mother or a bad wife. We cannot be responsible for another person's action, not even your child's. And we have to learn that we are valuable in our own right. So part of overcoming the depression that has come upon people with the lockdown and everything is that we need to take time to love ourselves, whether it's sitting in the garden and having the sun on your face or taking a walk in the park by yourself. We do not spend enough time loving ourselves, and that is very, very important. It's a lesson I had to learn. You know, that hour that you're at having your nails done, or if you can't afford a manicurist, you do it with your friends and you make it a social occasion. We need to just take that pressure off ourselves to perform. We're always performing. And we need to just learn that self-care. And it isn't an easy lesson, because we see that as a waste of time. But it is singularly the most important thing. And as a supporter of SADC, you'll know that we all need to be mentally okay with ourselves. And really, people who work through their lunchtime need to just even go outside for 15 minutes, just sit in the sun, put your earphones on, listen to some favorite music of yourselves. Be kind to yourself, because we don't value ourselves enough.
No, thank you. So one last thing, what would you say to someone that is a victim of gender-based violence, someone who's currently going through it? What do you say to that person? What is your message of hope to that person?
Well, I'd really like to say, first of all, you don't have to justify what happened to you to anybody. You need to rest in peace with what's happened to you. It was not your fault. It was the abuser's fault. Secondly, you know what? At the other side of the journey is an amazing new life for yourself. Start to love yourself and start to live in the fullness of what you can do Follow those dreams. Make a dream book. Make a vision board. Do something. But an amazing life. Look at me. I actually never thought I would love again. I never thought I'd have a life. And I'm living my best life. I get up every day and do the most amazing job in the whole world. I help people. What a privilege. And if you're looking for your calling, there is a place that helps rape and abuse victims or children just down the road from you that needs your help, where you can make a meaningful difference. You are wanted and you are needed.
Thank you so much, Mara. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I think one of the most beautiful things you said was you are valuable in your own right, and the importance of empowering women. I think in our society, because of the inequalities that exist, it's quite important for us to empower women and make sure that they've got the right resources in order to live their lives on their own before involving another person in it. So it's quite important for us to preach that message. But also something that came up for me was the importance of engaging religious leaders in trying to combat gender-based violence, because there's so much of that is quite involved, and just making sure that you're safe, even if you're in an unsafe situation, making sure that you'll still be safe, especially where kids are involved. So thank you so much for speaking to so many people. And I see a lot of people asking questions about whether or not gender-based violence doesn't affect men. Yes, it does. It's just that in this country, it affects more women. So it's quite important for us to engage in that conversation. So yes, thank you so much. We will have a Mindful Mondays where we speak about mental health in men. But thank you so much for coming through.
Can I give you all my email address? Because I answer every email that comes into our organization. It's Mara, M-A-R-A, and Tears, T-E-A-R-S, .co.za. And interestingly, on parting, it's 1 in 3 women, and it is double that of men. So it's not much lower.
Oh, wow.
1 in 6 men are getting abused in our country. The thing is, they don't speak out.
So how do we make sure that we create a space for them to speak out? Because I think it's quite important to speak to those men too.
Well, we do try to speak to them, and we do try to help them, because mostly it's the older men that don't speak out, but the younger men are speaking out because they don't want to be seen as gay or different. But actually, it's a real problem. It breaks their heart because they feel that their masculinity has been stolen with the rape. So we have a very, very real problem in our country that we are not addressing.
So how? Sorry to disturb you. I was about to say, so if, for example, a man is coming to you and is trying to speak about how he's been abused in a society that is primarily rooted in patriarchy and toxic masculinity, how do we correctly respond to that man so he feels like he's got the safe space in order to be able to engage or even ask further for help? You know, because like you're saying, you don't want to be seen as weak or those kinds of negative connotations. So how do we respond to that man? What's the best way? If they're not calling TS Foundation and it's just going to his friend or coming to me, for example, as a friend, how do I as a person respond to not make them feel weak or less than?
We do have organizations that we refer them to, and we try to link them up to as many organizations that offer that service. In South Africa, in certain areas there are more than others. We also arrange counseling for them, because every person in South Africa deserves their day in the sunlight. And we do our very best to help them, because we don't want to be a broken generation, irrespective of women and men. However, I must say, sadly, it is more women than men. So that was my focus, because I'm a survivor.
No, thank you so much, Mara. I feel like we could speak about this the whole night, but thank you so much for coming through. Thank you so much for the knowledge that you imparted onto us. I think more than anything, we've had a lot of survivors share their story here, and you as a survivor being courageous enough to, and actually paying it forward to make sure that you help the next woman is how I believe that this country should be structured, like to help and paid forward and live a life of service. So thank you so much for doing your bit, but also for sharing your story in order to help other survivors too. So thank you so much for coming through tonight.
Well, I hope to hear from lots of people, because I'm rooting for you all.
No, I'm going to share your email straight after this. A lot of people are saying thank you so much to the TS Foundation. So straight after this, I'm gonna put it on my stories.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Bye. Thank you so much for watching, guys.